we are at the point in the process where we're going to start to put together our recommendations. And then a team of us will put together a report, and we'll send that report out to everybody, and we'll have another meeting to vote on that report. As everybody, if everybody remembers from the initial charge from the county executive, we have 4 primary obligations for the Spending Affordability Committee. One is the projections of general fund revenues for the upcoming fiscal year. 2 is an analysis of the long-term fiscal outlook, including multi-year projections. 3 is a recommended level of new county debt, general obligation bonds, authorization. And 4 is any other findings under recommendation that the committee deems appropriate to present to the county in the report. I know why everybody uses PDF. I don't know what's. 1 second. So the voting members for the Spending Affordability Committee are on the screen now. Todd Otterburn, are you here today?
Yep,
Yes,
I am.
Great. Dr. Clinch?
I'm here.
Howie Figge?
he cannot make it today.
Okay. Ellen Giles? Ellen Giles? Okay. Khalida Hassan?
Here.
John Hendrickson?
Here.
Steve Hunt? Okay. Dr. Irani? Okay. Jimmy Jennings?
I'm here.
Thank you. Barbara Lawson?
Here.
Thank you. Leonardo McClarty?
I think he said he couldn't make it. Oh, he's
Okay.
here. He's here. Sorry.
Okay. Myself, Dr. Sun, Josh Zucker?
Here.
Thank you. So I guess I didn't, I guess Howie wasn't here. Ellen is not here, and Steve is not here, and Dr. Irani, correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so the discussion on the today we're going to discuss the primary recommendations for the report. If we don't get through today, which I'm hoping we do, we do have another meeting scheduled for next week if we need it. If not, we will work on the draft report. We'll submit that to everybody by Friday the 24th at 3, and we'll have a meeting on the 28th to vote on the final report. So as some context for what we've done before, we've historically recommended constrained, prudent, and proactive budgeting. It's due to shifts in the demographics for the county, slow growth trends, and lessening developable land. As everybody's aware, a significant portion of our revenue comes from property taxes. The goal of the report is to ensure the county has stable footing for any outcome and its fiscal outlook is sustainable. So that's primarily what we're trying to do. So sometimes you can look at these reports in the past and they can sound a lot of it sounds like, it's not a rosy outlook, but really what it is, it's about just having some fiscal restraint. We have to continue to fund every year. There's a lot of priorities in the county. And with that, we need to make sure that we're budgeting, that we recommend to our county agencies to budget accordingly, and to the county executive and the county council to to make sure that they take that fiscal responsibility. Remember, anything that we're doing is just a recommendation. All the decisions will be made by the county executive and the county council. So for the first, for our first item is the general fund revenue forecast. So right now, net of any transfers or one-time cost, the revenue forecast is about $1.3 billion. Holly, you agree with that number?
Yes.
Thank you. And the amount is an increase over fiscal year 23 of 5.6%. My take on this is the team here at the county is very close to the numbers for 2024, for fiscal year 2024. They're talking to the state regarding receipts and both from property taxes with the recent assessment changes and with income taxes as they come in slightly delayed. So I've always felt very comfortable going with the fiscal, with the fiscal number from the revenue forecast from the county on the next year. I'll open the floor to anyone in any of the voting members on the committee to discuss if there should be a recommendation to be different than the 5.6% that's recommended and the $1.3 billion in one-time funding, excluding one-time funding. And anybody else who wants to bring that up.
Hey, Steve, I'll jump in real quick. If we were to be asked to look back by the council or the executive and say, what have your recommendations been over the last 5 years, or what have your forecasts been over the last 5 years as compared to actual, do we have that readily available?
Yeah, we have that information, but you talk about what's the final budget compared to that or actual? Because actual not every year is available.
Actual revenues every historical year is not available?
No, actual is available. I was saying that if we're in the current year, like FY23, then we don't.
No. I think Todd's talking
it's
like.
Available. That's pretty easy to pull that there.
And Todd, are you talking like on the long-term projections or where we were year to year to year? Like if the report said next year is going to be 3.2%, was next year 3.2%?
Yeah, exactly. And the real number actually, if we're saying 1.314 billion is our revenue fund, our general fund revenue forecast for 24 that we're estimating in spring of 23, if we go back and say what was our forecast for last year, what was our forecast for the year before, and what was the actual for those years,
we can pull that information, but I just want to remind Todd and you and others, your last few years is very unique situation. Every county cities when pandemic hit, we're actually looking at a decrease or flat. That was a significant situation. I just want to put that in context there because people could get misleading if they just look at a number, doesn't understand what drives those numbers.
Yeah, obviously I understand that completely. I guess my point is just that that's an easy question for a council member or the executive to ask.
We have all the data. Don't worry about the data.
Except for this year.
Pardon?
We do not have the fiscal 23 number done yet.
Right. But I think we just need to be prepared to discuss it and to explain why. Okay, we estimated 1.31 billion and it was actually 1.7. I mean, obviously I'm making up a number, and then how do we explain it and make that difference relevant and understandable to the council and to the executive? I know it's definitely something. I mean, I've been asking about this for a while, and I think we need to be able to answer it easily, and we need to be able to explain it easily. Otherwise, we risk putting our relevance at risk, I think, because we're making a forecast, but we can't explain why we were either on or off in previous years.
Yeah, I think we've been, when I say we, I think Holly and the team have done a good job kind of taking everybody through why there have been adjustments. I'm trying to remember if in the presentation that you gave Holly, did you show did you show kind of some of the adjustments that occurred during the year? But I think we can get that information included, Todd.
Yeah, we'll be able to provide that.
What's that?
Yeah, we'll be able to provide the information. That's no problem.
And Holly, from your recollection, other than let's eliminate the grants from the pandemic, other receipts, do you know of any big shift? The only thing I know of, Todd, is the big shift in capital gains, right? But overall, that's always, I've seen swings on that because that's just not something that's predictable, right?
Yeah.
You don't know when somebody's going to make some sort of an execution strategy on their portfolio for whatever reason that they have that they need to do that, and that creates some sort of a gain. And I remember years ago when Steve Sachs was the chair of this committee, his comment was always, capital, that portion of the revenue should never be spent because you never know where it's going to be. You should focus on the repeatable, not the one-time type issues that do this, so that you can try to keep stable funding on the expense base, and any of the excess that comes from a bucket like that could be used for one-time uses. And, focusing more on the repeatable revenue, although this here includes an estimate of all revenue. Now, the other thing to note for the committee members is that follows a few quarters in. It's not something that happens aligned with the fiscal year that we're in. So there's always the delay on that portion of the tax base.
Right.
Just because of how people pay for that.
That's very true. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Todd. It's great point. We'll make sure we get that information. I think we've shown it in the past. It's good to have it in there again.
Yeah, I think it will be good to share with the committee on that there, and I totally agree on that. Make it understandable so people understand why on that, and some of the reasons Steve just mentioned. Plus, the income tax, there are a lot of one-time elements like federal stimulus and also inflation-driven part on that, and capital gains on that. All those different factors play a role. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be a change for 23, Todd. I don't think we budgeted or recommended an increase based on this level of inflation, but we'll see.
I'm not sure I'm advocating that it actually be included in the report unless the committee thinks that's wise to include. It is something that I think we just need to be able to immediately respond to if it's a question.
Okay, appreciate that. As to the 5.6%, do we have any other discussion on that? Does anybody want to make a motion to put that into the report?
Steve, sorry, I have one technical thing there. The 5.6% was accurate, but I just pulled the projection
total.
there. Yeah, the total is 1.36 million.
Yeah, but the 1.36.
Sorry, 1.36 billion. Yeah.
Not 1.3. Okay, all right. So 1.364 billion. Sorry.
Okay.
So
typo by PowerPoint. Thank you, Barbara. Any? Do we have?
Seconded.
All right, Dr. Clinch. Thank you. Is anyone opposed?
One quick question. It's just a technical question. Again, we've been through this in previous years. Is the increase over our estimated for fiscal 23? It can't be over the actual because we don't know that yet, right?
It's over budget.
Yeah.
Over the budget. Okay.
Hold on. Time out. the number, the recommendation in the report's going to be the number, Todd, the 1364. I put the 5.6 as a reference point, but the request is what's the revenue forecast? 136.
Okay.
So sorry for the confusion of saying the 5.6, but that's actually it's a revenue forecast, not the other one is the long-term growth percentage.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I know Todd didn't advocate to put that information into the report.
Barbara,
but,
Barbara,
I'm
real quick. Did anybody have any objections? I just want to take a second because Todd jumped in. I
Sure.
just want there's no objections on that piece of the vote. Okay, hearing none, I consider that to be in the report. Go ahead, Barbara. So you're saying Todd didn't make a recommendation to put that in there, but you think we should put the
I do think
comparison?
maybe not as fulsome as we discussed, but I'm of the opinion that our work is important enough that we give the reasoning and the background as much as possible so that people have the opportunity to better understand and actually be more informed when they ask questions.
Yeah.
So that's my position on that subject. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think one year we put it in like an appendix, just as information. I'm just trying to remember to go back and look at some of the older reports. Okay, as we move on, the next item on here is the bond authorization recommendation. Last year, the committee recommended 65 million. Holly, remind me, was it 72.5? Was that the number that ended up being authorized?
No, last year, yes, 75.2, I think. It's not
75.2.
7.2 was the final government approved the CIP included.
Appreciate it. So I've put three numbers in here. Please don't anchor yourselves to those. This is always one where, from a committee perspective, we have a lot of discussion around. My feeling is we have a lot of debt as a community. We talk about balanced budgets in government and how we have to balance the budget. Well, one thing that the state and local governments get to do is do their capital budgeting outside of that. So that's how their revenue gets balanced and everything else is paid for through bond issuance in a separate budget line item. But so your interest rates are increasing, but we do have a lot of projects that have been started in the county. And we do need to put forth some sort of a bond authorization recommendation for the county. So I think, Holly, when we were going through this, it's about 220 million or so in CIP requests. Is that the right number?
I'm sorry, say that.
How much is the total request for capital for this year? So
Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
237 million in general obligation requests right now.
That's what's requested based
Thank
on
you.
all the entities.
Yeah. So
submission.
basically the request is 237 million. Of that, about 80 to 85 million are new projects. Of those new projects, about half of them are for Ellicott City, related to the mitigation programs going on that. So obviously we're not going to be able to do that. And does everybody just see a gray screen?
Yes, gray.
Yes.
I don't.
Oh,
There we go.
Thank you. So do we have a recommendation for a bond authorization level for the county for fiscal year 24? Oh, there's.
Question.
Oh, go ahead, Todd.
I had a question, Todd. You can't ask a question. I asked a question.
I don't feel informed enough to know what I feel yet. I guess the question is, when you look at what's rolling off and the current rate environment, what do each of these three numbers do to our ratios of capital outlays versus revenues? And are they, if we go 50, is it, plus 0.001%? If we go 75, it's 0.0015% in terms of changing our ratios. What does this actually mean as opposed to a number where we can't really put it in context? Because what strikes me is that over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've picked a number, but obviously our revenue is changing. So the question is, do these numbers represent an increase that compromises our ratios, or are they actually a decrease even at the $75 million level?
And
understand what you're
if I
saying.
could, and Steve, if I could jump in maybe a different way, I believe we had a chart that talked about our debt service ratio, and I think there was an assumption that, and Holly, maybe you could grab that slide. I think it talked about where we were going forward, and there was an assumption of a certain level of bond authorization in each of those years. And that might give to Todd's point, that might give us a better picture of, where we were at that number, and then we could decide whether or not that number that was in the assumption is good, or does it need to be lower because we feel like we're too close to that tolerance level.
So I'll consult with finance later for more detailed exercise, and also feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I can't
We
pull
have
the slide
representative
real
from
quick.
finance. But the information I think Steve does refer to is in the presentation by finance the other day. It's called one slide, I think slide 12, debt service projections there. That one was showing that based on current assumption, what they're assuming 90 million annual debt issuance there, then in fiscal 23, debt service as percentage of revenue is about 10%, which is right at the policy level. It's going to be higher than 10 for the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years on that. Then it will come back to right under 10%. So it will be over self-imposed debt ceiling for about 5 to 6 years. And one thing I need to point it out is, I think one of you just mentioned, is that because revenue overall picture surprisingly better than everybody thought there, and we have been very disciplined on that. So even that general take is going to be exceeding debt ceiling for a little while. The magnitude and length actually have been improving from a couple years ago. I remember a couple years ago, at one point, it was even projected close to 12%. We were really concerned at that point. This one is actually the highest level projected is only 11%. The length is also, I think, a couple years shorter than 2 years ago when we're looking at that. So there are some improvement there, although we are still looking at slightly above policy in the next few years.
So
Just to quickly add, this is Refuge, Hila.
my man.
Quickly, what Dr. Son Harley said is accurate, but our $90 million is for 2024. And then from 2025 is $35 million going forward. So the rates, as you mentioned, Todd, will continue to drop. So by 2027, 2028, will be below 10%, which is our imposed debt limit. And the reason is going to be high in, going to go slightly a few basis points higher than 10 in 2027 is because of our drawdown of our WIFIA loan for the Ellicott City Safe and Sound Tunnel. So we hope to draw it down then, and that's going to spike it up a little. But after that, based on the $75 million annual Geo Bonds, the rate should be coming down and will definitely be under 10% by 2029. And that's been the goal.
So you're saying this fiscal year, your assumption was 90, and then in the out years was 75 across the board.
Yes. But again, we are using that assumption. That is not what we're recommending, but we're using that assumption.
But just it's a good
understand
frame
how
of
you calculate your
reference.
percentage.
So if we bring it down to 75, if that's what the committee is recommending, of course, the county executive will not determine what he's going to do. That would drop a few basis points, definitely.
Craig just had a question, and it popped up. I don't know how to look at the comments and see that.
I got you, Steve. It says any projections of use of HOCO in FY24 it may have an effect on the amount of Geo bonds needed.
Yes, I think that's
Yes.
the numbers still obviously in process of discussion on that, but definitely, I mean, Refuge can prove that last couple years that we have been using more PAYGO, which is the right way to use one-time money to offset debt, and that's part of the reason we were able to keep Geo Bond at historical low level, and we plan to continue that in FY24.
Yes.
Right, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you. Todd, did your question get answered?
Yes, it did.
So Steve, Leonardo, so I have a
Yep.
question, and it's really probably more for Holly or Refuge, and that is, having been on this committee, for a number of years now, we end up having this, I guess, pretty extensive discussion regarding, I remember at one time it was whether or not to do 85, I think 80 or 75 back when other Steve Sachs was leading this group. And so on the one hand, I understand obviously the county exec and county council can, elect to go with what number they choose in terms of bond issuances and so forth. But I guess maybe for context, it seems like our recommendations have always been, I don't know if I want to say significantly lower, but certainly have been lower than what has been actual. And so I'm just curious, perhaps, have there been, I guess, maybe other factors that maybe as a body that we haven't been aware of? Thus, it seems like, I don't know if it's just a case of us being conservative as a recommending body, or if what we've been proposing just hasn't been realistic. And so, actually, I don't know if this is for Holly or Refuge, but in terms of just when we look at the actual number versus what we've recommended, just because I think it may continue to give us some perhaps better context as we make a recommendation.
I can speak to the budget side. I think Refuge can chime in from finance regarding the annual bond issuance, because it's a little bit different from the budgeted level. In terms of the budget, last few years there, it's very true, Leonardo, and thanks for the question there. The government has been doing best, and actually the ending result is largely thanks to the committee's recommendations there. We have been holding the approved Geo budget at historically low level. It's last couple of years, it's between 72 to 75 million, much lower than the typical in the previous years here, in acknowledgement of the fact that our debt burden has been escalating and the long-term projection looks like it's going to be exceeding the policy ceiling for some years. So we are mindful of that. But in reality, there are other factors. One thing is there are two really important parts. One is the county's infrastructure has been aging. There are a lot of accumulated maintenance needs, no matter it's road resurfacing, stormwater needs there. You saw the other day presentation, a lot of accumulated needs there that it doesn't go away and actually get more and more. So that actually historically not always had enough investment to keep up with that, and that getting worse as times goes on. So that actually getting more and more needs just for that. And then on top of that, there are some new projects. Certain part are very sizable. Safe and Sound definitely is one of the project which is very important to address the flooding and safety issues here, but it's a sizable project. There are a lot of other projects also very important, no matter it's new school, community college, the mass building, all those other things, they're all play a role. And in aggregate, in reality, just when elected officials look at all those needs from all the community representative there, they just couldn't settle on the original number the committee was recommending. I mean, again, the recommendations are highly appreciated there, but in order to keep things moving, address new and existing issues here, end up like being still higher than the committee recommendation, but lower than historical level of budgets. That's what happened. And that might continue to be the case, just to be very honest.
I think Dr. Sanders said it. That's what we've been doing, and that reflects on what we're issuing. We've been issuing less, even though we have the authorized but on issue that we issue as projects go on, but it's been way lower than anticipated.
Thank you.
The argument then to keep the number low this year would be that even with what has already been previously authorized and what we anticipate to be issued from those authorizations over the next few years, we're going to reach our policy ceiling in the next few years. So we have to be cautious what we're authorizing this year because we know we're going to breach our policy ceiling in the next few years. So we don't want to be
We've already reached our policy ceiling, Todd.
Pardon me?
We're already above our debt ceiling. I mean, we breached that a few years ago.
That's
So-
true.
As of FY22, it came down. As of last year, it was below the policy. So this year, we anticipate it's going to be slightly over the policy level at 0.02. So,
Okay.
But it was above it before that, right, Refu?
oh yes, it was. It was above it for 2 years. 2020
We expected it when it went above. We expected it to be above for a number of years, not just two.
Yes.
Happened to go down below slightly.
Yes. And it's the work of this, I would say, the credit to this committee for highlighting that and making your recommendation. I know it was a difficult decision we took back then when we said it was going to be higher, but you can see that is reflective here. For last year, it was lower. So we anticipate it's going to be higher this year.
I'm not advocating for going higher. I just wanted to make sure we had that clarification.
No, I say the work you did is why it came down.
No. I was talking to Todd. Sorry, Refu.
Okay, yeah.
I was telling him I'm just saying I wanted to make sure everybody was clear that when it did go up, it just happened to come down. It wasn't that we expected it necessarily to come down as quickly as it did.
Refuge, this is Richard. Are you saying, I'm looking at the debt service projections sheet from the Holly was referencing slide 12, and it says the assumptions are $90 million a year starting 2024. You had said $35 million a year. So
It says 75.
No, yeah, but I think the 75 I was referencing was the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, Holly was right. Holly was right. It's $90 million going forward. But again, if that number comes down, yes, we'll definitely be under the debt ceiling level.
So it's $90 million going forward in the bill.
That's our assumption. Yes.
Okay. All right. So
$90 million
it only took 13 years of being on the committee for the forward-looking number to go from 75 to 90 in the modeling. Got it.
So
Go ahead, Barbara.
you can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I take the position that our rather modest recommendations in the past have actually been part of what has brought the bond level down over the years. So I would continue to be conservative on that, and I'm going to recommend 60 million.
Okay. So we have a recommendation for 60. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Do we have anyone opposed to 60 million as the recommendation? Okay. The recommendation is 60.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I took my screen down just because it was for the conversation. I'm going to bring it back up now. Or attempt to. Okay, so the next item we have is the long-term fiscal outlook. And this is the percentage, I think, Todd, we were talking about this earlier. This is the percentage that would be for kind of the annual outgrowth over the next 5 years. And based on the report that Holly presented last week, that number was 3.3% annual growth on a go-forward basis. Does anybody have any comments or suggestions on what we should put in the report related to the long-term growth in out years?
3.3 seems a little high to me.
Okay, Josh.
So I think when we combine just all the headwinds that the state itself is facing, this is from, a year-to-year population decline, any even if we hit a soft landing or we're capable of hitting a soft landing nationally, 3.3 would be over, and it would almost be like 50% more than the national growth rate, which would be estimated around 2% for a soft landing. And that's if we hit a soft landing. Then just the interest rate headwinds, it just 3.3 just seems like, and on top of the continued demographic trends, like I don't foresee negative growth rate year after year in Howard County, but like I said, this seems overly optimistic.
Okay. Just for, benefit of the discussion, I think the one thing to look at that's different than some of the others is that a significant portion of our revenue comes from property taxes. And even with reduction in, we're starting to build that buffer between assessable base and taxable base again. So there's some room for the valuations to come down and the taxes to not be impacted. And that's what kind of got us through the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
So not disagreeing that 3.3 might be aggressive, just giving some context to why our number might be a little higher than maybe national averages.
No, I think we're in a much better situation than both state and national, but we're not exponentially better.
No, I understand that. Dr. Clinch, anything you would like to say about that?
The Maryland forecast right now from my presentation, I don't have it memorized. So give me 30 seconds. So they're projecting Maryland growth to be above 3% in terms of personal income. Moody's, and even the Board of Revenue estimates. So 3.3 to be above that level for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years. And the national outlook is slightly stronger for personal income. So 3.3 is not an unrealistic number given the projections. And again, the projections are based on the assumptions that may or may not pan out. But both Moody's and Board of Revenue estimates are projecting personal income growth in Maryland above that level, and GDP growth nationally, close to that level or above for the next 2-3 years.
So just two things very quick. One is actually, I really like what Josh said to put a conservative part. It's because there was a lot of uncertainties there. The other point is that there are factors that we did try to factor in. One is assessable base, as Steve just explained. That's the reason Maryland has a triennial assessment cycle. That's why the strength could be expected for at least a few years on the property tax part. And income tax, our projection actually already putting in a little bit cushion from what Dr. Clinch and the state original projected level in terms of personal income in the next few years. So we did take down a little bit, but I do agree that there was a lot of uncertainty in the economy, which combined with the demographic trend. So I understand the concern.
Yeah, and I think in some previous years we've held that more, I guess, less because of the revenue. It's interesting, like the focus for the question is where do we think revenues are going to be? The focus in our responses typically say, can we moderate expenses, right? Because what happens is we want long-term fiscal responsibility from the community, and not to jump ahead. One of the recommendations would be continue to have conversations amongst the county agencies about reasonable growth rates within budgets. And this particular line item, as we've written it in the report, I think we've held back some of the growth because that helps hold back some of the expense growth, which is key to maintaining, kind of our fiscal health. And I think there's been years past, Holly, and I think Barbara did it a couple of years ago, where we recommended a lower number for that specific reason. And we can, depending on what people vote on here, we can make sure it's crafted in a way that explains what we're trying to do. So, any more discussion on the growth, the long-term growth rate?
I'll just second what you said, Steve, about what's happening with the assessed base. My assessed increase is like 35% in the area that's being reassessed this year, revalued this year. It'll be forever. I'll be going up 5% a year, and it'll never catch up. So I guess my point is that, with nearly half our budget or half of our revenues coming from that source, the 3.3 doesn't sound so big when the assessments are going up by 25, 30, 35%, and they're capped at 5 on the increase. We're going to be seeing 5% growth in the revenues from property taxes, probably for a long time now.
Yeah. Does anybody want to put forth a recommendation on a number?
I'll agree with the 3.3 and put that forth as our forecast.
Okay.
Second,
I'm withdrawing my skepticism. Thank you for educating me.
Thanks, Josh. All right. Anyone opposed? We have a first and a second. Anyone opposed to that number? Okay, very good. We'll use that for the writing of the report. The next piece is on it's the last piece. It's on any additional recommendations, any other recommendations that the committee would like to see in the report regarding what the county can do for its fiscal health. I will say one of the recommendations I'd like to put in there is a continual recommendation that there's some sort of meeting of the minds, that there's some sort of conversation around long-term countywide, agency-wide budget planning. I think we've seen in the numbers that are coming through, the requests from all of the agencies that the county funds significantly outweigh the current revenue projection increase. And that's the job of the county executive and the county council to kind of figure out how to get everybody work together and come up with reasonable numbers or come up with a number that they're going to spend. But at the same time, as I look at the long-term outlook based on these increases, obviously we'll have a balanced budget, but there's continued pressure, and we have limited opportunities to increase revenues. We've done different fees and different taxes over the years, but we're kind of beholden to the state when it comes to our income tax revenue and the valuations on the property taxes. And I think a 1 cent increase in property tax yields about $5 to $6 million. Holly, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's about that. Yeah.
So for us to be able to fund everything that's being requested, we'd have to have something like a 20% increase in our property tax rate to cover the asks. So that's a pretty significant increase on our constituents in a time when they're feeling pressure from inflation and everything else. So that's one recommendation I have. Does anybody agree with that, disagree with that recommendation?
agree.
Very good. Thanks, Barbara. So we have anybody opposed to having some language in there related to that? Very good. Okay. Any other recommendations the committee would like to put forth?
What about the recommendation this is Richard, what about the recommendations we've made in the past for meeting, throughout the year? Having the committee, do we want to reinstate that one or not?
The full year, the committee meeting the whole year?
Or more than the time we have?
Yeah, it's like we met this year, but we spent so much time on the other charge on the HOCO by design. We kind of pushed through a lot of this stuff, and I always feel rushed in getting through. We had a lot of people just submit information, so I'm good with that. I'll second that, Richard. Anybody opposed to putting in a longer period of time for the committee to meet on an annual basis?
I agree with that. We should at least meet quarterly.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Anything else?
Do we know what we're going to do yet in this main report with respect to HOCO by design, or is the HOCO by design summary report separate?
That's a separate report. It's already done. We voted on that.
No, I know. Yep.
Yeah. Any other recommendations from the committee?
In terms of just making this report more personally digestible for the average citizen, would it be productive to add some sort of chart or graph that shows what our annual spending per capita is in this, to boil it down so that the individual taxpayer can read this report and understand that, well, heck, the budget per person, my budget in the county is $4,712.
Yeah, we can. I think we talk a little bit in the PowerPoint there, but I think that's a good idea but we actually talk both per capita spending and per student spending. But I think it would be really good to put some information there for the readers, so we can provide information.
The per student spending is complicated just because 2/3 is county and 1/3 is state, and so what's our real spending per I mean, it gets very confused, but I think over the population at large in the county, it's just a very simple total budget 1.4 billion divided by 350,000. It's an easy thing to produce. I think it would just make the report a little more user-friendly for non-numbers people.
This is Richard, and I agree, but one of the things that's problematic with per capita numbers is they tend to be eye-popping. So you might want to consider doing a table that has, taxes as a percentage of personal income and per capita, because the truth lies somewhere between those two numbers in terms of measuring tax burden. It just tends to be a very alarming number, and you can be criticized for using that. So, and then per person spending is also good. So I would just suggest putting in both measures.
Per person spending is fine. I would defer to you. I haven't analyzed what the numbers might look like and whether they're eye-popping or not, but I think it's just good for people to understand what the county is spending per person. If you want to do it, yeah,
I agree. I would just add as a percentage of personal income measure in some way.
So we'll look at that. It's a dual. The per capita spending is easy. Tax burden is there are different ways to do that. So we can, Dr. Clincher, we can discuss what's the best way to do that, because some is based on your property, some is really based on your income, right? So I don't know, we have the data for every single year to measure in the best way, but we can talk about if there are a way to reflect and then maybe bring back to the committee to decide on that.
Thanks.
Okay. So we'll put something in there. Any other recommendations?
This is Kalida. I was wondering if we were going to discuss transfer tax or any other sources of increase, because I believe we've recommended that in the past and don't believe it passed the county council.
I thought the transfer tax did increase.
Did it?
It was
couple years
increased,
ago.
and actually,
It was, okay.
yeah, Steve Hunt actually asked a question in one of the sessions, was asked how much was additional dollar raised and did it meet expectation. And in one of presentation, I think on January 31st, I answered that it was actually transfer tax and the school surcharge were both raised pretty sensibly in the last few years, and it does actually raise quite some revenue. However, it's actually not as originally expected amount because some of the transactions, especially on school surcharge, was actually lower than originally expected. So the rate was higher, but transactions is less than original thought on that. So, but a combined impact is still both tax changes. It does actually have been generating more revenue, primarily supporting capital projects. But we can add that information just to put in context, because to your point, Dr. Hassan, this is one of the committee suggested years ago, like explore those tax resources, and the county did actually, elected officials made that decision and did have the impact regarding the funding sources there. So I think it's worthwhile to include the information.
Great, thank you.
Any other recommendations for additional revenue or expense controls? One of the things we've previously put in here is a discussion on one of the largest uses of county funds, which is related to schools and funding at levels of MOE above or wherever. Anybody have any recommendations on putting anything in the report about that?
I would be all for continuing to beat that drum.
Any other support for that as well?
I mean, I would definitely support it. I'm just skeptical of our ability to impact that. But it remains the biggest single issue and will indefinitely.
At the rates we're going. I mean, right now the requests are greater just from that one entity above all recommended or expected revenue increases.
Well, and if sorry about that. If the politics remain as they are and candidates continue to campaign on how much they spend versus how much versus the results, then we're facing a pretty stiff headwind.
Yeah. All right, we'll put some language in there. Any other? I got a few different recommendations here. I've got stuff about agencies planning on long-term growth together, longer committee assignments, budget, some data broken out on a per person spending basis, and then maybe a conversation around funding around MOE or above. Anything else that anybody thinks should be in the report? Obviously, we'll have. In the report, we'll include a section from Dr. Clinch, as well as some of the data that Holly presented in her report, kind of sandwiching in some of these recommendations.
Yeah, I forgot who brought this up the other day. Let's talk about when I talk about capital budget and debt. Let's talk about the which is continuation of last year's recommendation about unmet capital needs related to repair, replacing existing infrastructure that just continue to need a lot of attention. I want to.
Yeah. Yeah, we should put that in there. Repairing existing infrastructure. Anybody have a opposition to putting that in there? Okay, very good. All right, it's very hard to write a report with a full committee, so I'll send in an email, ask a few people to help me with that process, so that we can get a report out of the committee in time to review and vote on it towards the end of the month. Hopefully, we'll be able to get this together quickly and finish up. I do want to thank everybody for their participation today. Very good discussion, great dialogue. I appreciate that. As always, I enjoy doing this. So hopefully we'll be able to come out with a good work product to give to the county executive and the county council to review and inform their decisions they need to make. Holly, anything you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Steve, very much. I think this is a very good discussion. One point of clarification, do you see next week as the needs for the full committee, or just you will pull a few people like working?
Yeah, I think, from what I have here, I don't think that was really a lead over. If we had more discussion that we needed to go into the report. So I would ask that we'll take the next 2 meetings to finalize the report and then put a draft of the report and put that in front of the committee for a vote on the 28th.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Well, with that, I don't have anything else. Holly, do you have anything else?
Not really. I just thank you very much for the discussion, and thanks everyone for all the good points made and questions asked. Thank you.
Very good. All right, we will give everybody an hour back of their day. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Thank you.